Do you remember when Jordy Nelson was Aaron Rodgers' favorite target? Or when LeVeon Bell was a top 5 running back in the NFL? Or even when LeGarrette Blount was the starting running back of a Super Bowl winning New England Patriots team? If you forgot about any of these players, this is the right video for you. In today's video, we are going to be looking at players from the 2010s that were really, really good, but we might have forgot about. So let's go ahead and get right into this. I literally have a list in front of me of like 10 players from the 2010s that were really good, but people tend to forget about. So we already did talk about Jordy Nelson, LeVeon Bell, and LeGarrette Blount. Those three names haven't been said in a long time. Jordy Nelson was actually one of the best receivers in the NFL. Before Davante Adams, he was Aaron Rodgers' #1 receiver, and he was actually really, really good. He has had 4 1,000-yard receiving seasons and 3 seasons with over 13 touchdowns. That is actually really, really good. A theme that you're going to see later in this video is that a lot of these players were really, really good running backs and receivers for a good portion of their career, but they ended up falling off. Running backs and receivers are probably more replaceable than other positions, especially if you aren't a superstar. You can easily be replaced. Jordy Nelson was a good receiver, and here LeVeon Bell, he was a great running back, but he was never a superstar. Or maybe he was. Maybe some people do consider him a superstar at the peak of his career, but he definitely was a top 5 to top 10 running back in the NFL with the Steelers. Ever since he held out his contract with the Steelers, he went to the New York Jets, was not even close to the same as he was with the Steelers, and after that he kind of just fell off. With the Steelers, he had one of the top offensive lines in the league, and as soon as he left, he just was never the same. As mentioned earlier, LeGarrette Blount was the starting running back for a Super Bowl winning New England Patriots team. He was actually pretty decent. He was never amazing or even a star or even one of the top 10 players at his position, but he definitely should be remembered as the running back that won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. And he should probably be remembered for more than that. In 2016, LeGarrette Blount had a total of 18 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards. So he did have his really good seasons where he was one of the he probably was a top 10 running back at his peak. But that was about a season or two. After that, he wasn't too bad. At the age of 30 is when he rushed for 1,000 yards, so that was pretty late in his career. But LeGarrette Blount is another player that we should not forget about. Another stud from the 2010s, 2-time Pro Bowler, Matt Forte. This is the 3rd running back on this list, and I promise you this is not the last. But Matt Forte is one of the best running backs of the 2010s, and we definitely should not forget about him. The reason we tend to forget about these star running backs is because they're really, really replaceable, and they come and go. Every 5 or 10 years, you see different running backs dominating the league, as opposed to like quarterbacks, which Tom Brady obviously played for 20 seasons, Aaron Rodgers dominated for 15 seasons, Drew Brees, all these great quarterbacks that were on top of the league for many, many seasons. But these running backs, their prime only lasts a few years. That's why we forget about these really good running backs, but definitely should not forget about Matt Forte. He was definitely amazing. If you thought Matt Forte was good, Jamal Charles was even better. He was a 2-time All-Pro and a 4-time Pro Bowler. Jamal Charles was absolutely amazing, but for whatever reason, people tend to forget about him. I forgot about him until about 30 minutes ago is when I remembered him. So, a lot of running backs that people tend to forget about. If you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, you definitely did not forget about Jamal Charles. At least I would think you would. But Jamal Charles was definitely amazing. There are still a good amount of running backs left on this list, but to switch over to the defensive side of things, this is actually the only defensive player that I had. If you guys do want to see a part 2 of this where I add more defensive players in other positions, I definitely can. But anyways, Clay Matthews, he was one of the best defenders on the Green Bay Packers, and he really was the captain and the anchor for the Packers defensively. He was a 6-time Pro Bowler. He really was one of the best defensive players of the 2010s, and we should not forget about him. If you're a fan of the Chicago Bears, you definitely did not forget about this guy. But Brandon Marshall might be the best player on this list. Brandon Marshall was a 6-time Pro Bowler and had over 1,000 yards receiving 8 times in his career. This is better than any statistics of any player so far. So Brandon Marshall was absolutely amazing. I did already say how he was amazing for the Chicago Bears. He also did spend some time in Denver, in New York, and in Seattle. So Brandon Marshall had a long career, and he was truly amazing. This guy was a lot more recent. Todd Gurley was one of the best running backs for a period of time. In just 6 years, he made 3 Pro Bowls and twice was a first-team All-Pro. We all know what happened to Todd Gurley. He got arthritis in his knee, and he really just was never the same. He spent some time in Atlanta, but he was never as good as he was with the Rams. If you're a Rams fan, and even if you're a Falcons fan, you probably did not forget about Todd Gurley this fast, but a lot of people already did forget how good Todd Gurley really was in his prime. There were a lot of one-hit wonders that I decided to leave off of this list, and if I want to mention those guys in a later video, I will. But a lot of people argue that Chris Johnson was a one-hit wonder, and that is just not the case. He is very well known for his 2,000-yard season, but he has had 3 Pro Bowl appearances, and he actually had 6 straight seasons with 1,000 yards rushing. Chris Johnson was iconic in the early 2010s, and we should not forget about him. Here is another player that if you're not a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, you might have forgot about. But if you are a fan of the Cowboys, like me, you probably do remember DeMarco Murray. DeMarco Murray was a star in his prime. 2014, he led the NFL in rushing and was a first-team All-Pro, also won Offensive Player of the Year. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler, twice with Dallas and once with Tennessee. After he left Dallas, he was never really the same, even though he did make that 1 Pro Bowl after he left Dallas. That was really his career. It wasn't a long career, but he decided to retire, and I'm really glad that the Cowboys drafted DeMarco Murray and let him shine with that great offensive line in 2014. I definitely will never forget about DeMarco Murray. We are almost done with this. We just have a couple more receivers to go. I hope that we all remember Doug Baldwin. He retired somewhat recently after the 2018 season. He was never amazing. He made 2 Pro Bowls, which is pretty cool, but Doug Baldwin, he was just one of those guys that even if he wasn't amazing, I feel like you just should remember him, even though a lot of people forget. Doug Baldwin was one of my favorite receivers. He was Russell Wilson's #1 target for a decent amount of time, and I really like Doug Baldwin. Alright, so I want to leave you guys with this. As a Cowboys fan, Dez Bryant was one of my favorite receivers in the NFL for a long time, and to see a lot of people say that they forgot about Dez Bryant is actually kind of sad. He was one of the top receivers in the NFL, and if you're a diehard football fan, you probably didn't forget about Dez Bryant, but there's a lot of people that did forget about him. So let's just remember how great this guy really was.